He who understands the conditions of life does not strive after what is of no use to life. He who understands the conditions of destiny does not strive after what is beyond the reach of knowledge. In nourishing the body, it is necessary to have beforehand the things appropriate to its support. But there are cases where there is a superabundance of such things, and yet the body is not nourished. In order to have life, it is necessary that it not have left the body. But there are cases when the body has existed, and yet the higher life of the spirit has perished. When life comes, it cannot be declined. When it goes, it cannot be detained. Alas, the men of the world think that to nourish the body is sufficient to preserve life. When such nourishment is not sufficient to preserve life, what can be done? Though all that men can do will be insufficient, yet there are things which they feel they ought to do, and they do not try to avoid doing them. For those who wish to avoid caring for the body, their best plan is to abandon the world. Abandoning the world, they are free from its entanglements. Free from its entanglements, their minds are correct, and their temperament equable. Thus correct and equable, they succeed in securing a renewal of life. In securing a renewal of life, they are not far from the true secret of their being. But how is it sufficient to abandon worldly affairs? How is it sufficient to forget the business of life? Though the renouncing of worldly affairs, the body has no more toil. Though forgetting the business of life, the vital power is not diminished. When the body is completed and the vital power is restored to its original vigor, the man is one with heaven. Heaven and earth are the father and mother of all things. It is by their union that the body is formed. It is by their separation that a new beginning is brought about. When the body and vital power are not diminished, we have what may be called the transference of power. From the vital force there comes another more vital, and man returns to be the assistant of heaven. My master Yeze asked Yin, the warden of the gate, saying, "The perfect man walks under water without encountering any obstruction, treads on fire without being burned, walks on high above all things without any fear. Let me ask how he attains to do this." The warden Yin replied, "It is by keeping of the pure breath of life. It is not to be described as an achievement of his skill or daring. Sit down, and I will explain it to you. Whatever has form, semblance, sound, and color is a thing. How can one thing come to be different from another? It is not possible for any of these things to reach what preceded them. They are but form and visibility. But the perfect man attains to be without form, as it were, and beyond the capability of being transformed. When one attains to this and carries it out to the highest degree, how can other things stop him? He will occupy the place assigned to him without going beyond it, and lie concealed in the clue that has no end. He will study with delight the process that gives beginning and ending to all things. By gathering his nature into unity, by nourishing his vital power, by concentrating his virtue, he will penetrate to the making of things. In this condition, with his heavenly constitution kept entire, and no crevice in his spirit, how can things disturb his serenity? Take the case of a drunken man falling from his carriage. Though he may suffer injury, he will not die. His bones and joints are the same as those of other men, but the injury which he receives is different. His spirit is entire. He knew nothing about getting into the carriage and nothing about falling from it. The thought of death or life, or of any alarm or affright, does not enter his breast. Therefore he encounters danger without shrinking from it. Completely under the influence of the liquor he has drunk, it is thus with him. How much more would it be so if we were under the influence of his heavenly constitution? The sagely man is kept hidden in his heavenly constitution, and therefore nothing can injure him. A man in the pursuit of vengeance would not break the sword that had done the deed, nor, however easily made wrathful, wreak his resentment on fallen brick. In this way there would be peace, without the disorder of assaults and fighting, without the punishments of death and slaughter. Such would be the issue of the course I have described. If the disposition that is of human origin is not developed, but that which is the gift of heaven, the development of the latter will produce goodness, while that of the former will produce hurt. If the latter were not wearied of, and the former not slighted, the people would be brought nearly to their true nature. When Confucius was on his way to Chu, as he issued from a forest, he saw a hunchback catching cicadas on the point of a rod as if he were picking them up with his hand. "You are clever," said he to the man. "Is there any method in it?" The hunchback replied, "There is. For 5 or 6 months I practiced with 2 pellets till they never fell down. Then I only failed with a small fraction of the cicadas I tried to catch. Having succeeded in the same way with 3 pellets, I missed only 1 cicada in 10. Having succeeded with 5, I caught the cicadas as if I were gathering them. My body is to me no more than the stump of a broken trunk, and my shoulder no more than the branch of a rotten tree. Great as heaven and earth are, and multitudinous as things are, I take no notice of them, but only of the wings of my cicadas, neither turning nor inclining to one side. I would not for them all exchange the wings of my cicadas. How should I not succeed in taking them?" Confucius looked around and said to his disciples, "Where the will is not diverted from its object, the spirit is concentrated." This might have been spoken of this hunchback gentleman. Yan Hui asked Confucius, saying, "When I was crossing the Gulf of Changshan, the ferryman handled the boat like a spirit. I asked him whether such management of a boat could be learned. He replied, 'It may. Good swimmers learn it quickly, but as for divers, without having seen a boat, they can manage it at once.' The ferryman did not directly tell me what I asked. I venture to ask you what he meant." Confucius replied, "Good swimmers acquire the ability quickly. They forget the water and its dangers. As to those who are able to dive, and without having seen a boat are able to manage it at once, they look on the watery gulf as a hillside, and the upsetting of a boat as the going back of a carriage. Such upsettings and goings back have occurred multitudes of times, and have not seriously affected their minds. Wherever they go, they feel at ease on their occurrence. He who is competing for a piece of earthenware in archery puts forth all his skill. If the prize is a buckle of brass, he shoots timorously. If it is an article of gold, he shoots as if he were blind. The skill of the archer is the same in all the cases, but in the 2 latter cases he looks on the external prize as most important. All who attach importance to what is external show stupidity in themselves." Ting Kaiser was having an interview with Duke Wei of Chou, who said to him, "I have heard that your master has studied the subject of life. What have you, good sir, heard from him about it?" Ting Kaiser replied, "Am I waiting on him in the courtyard with my broom? What should I have heard from my master?" Duke Wei said, "Do not put off the question. I wish to hear what you have to say." Kaiser then replied, "I have heard my masters say that they who skillfully nourish their life are like shepherds who whip up the sheep that they see lagging behind." "What did he mean?" asked the Duke. The reply was, "In Lu there was a Shampao who lived among the rocks and drank only water. He would not share with the people in their toils and the benefits springing from them. Though he was now in his 70th year, he had still the complexion of a child. Unfortunately, he encountered a hungry tiger that killed and ate him. There was also Chuang Tzu, who hung up a screen at his lofty door, and to whom all the people hurried to pay their respects. In his 40th year, he fell ill with a fever and died. Of these 2 men, Pao nourished his inner man, and the tiger ate his outer. He nourished his outer man, and disease attacked his inner. Both of them neglected whipping up their lagging sheep. Confucius said, "A man should not retire and hide himself. He should not push forward and display himself. He should be like the decayed tree that stands in the center of the ground. Where these three conditions are fulfilled, the name will reach its greatest height. People fear the dangers of a path when one man in 10 is killed. Fathers and sons, elder brothers and younger, warn one another that they must not go on a journey without a large number of retainers. Is it not a mark of wisdom to do so? But there are dangers that men incur on the mats of their beds and in eating and drinking, and no warning is given against them. Is it not a mark of error?" The officer of prayer, in his dark and square-cut robes, goes to the pigeon and thus counsels the pigs. "Why should you shrink from dying? I will for 3 months feed you on grain. Then for 10 days I will fast, and keep vigil for 3 days, after which I will put down the mats of white grass and lay your shoulders and rumps on the carved stand. Will not this suit you?" If he had spoken from the standpoint of the pigs, he would have said, "The better plan will be to feed us with our bran and chaff and leave us in our pen." When consulting for himself, he preferred to enjoy, while he lived, his carriage and cap of office, and, after death, to be borne to the grave on the ornamented carriage with the canopy over his coffin. Consulting for the pigs, he did not think of these things, but for himself he would have chosen them. Why did he think so differently for himself and for the pigs? Once, when Duke Huan was hunting by a marsh, with Quan Chung driving the carriage, he saw a ghost. Laying his hand on that of Quan Chung, he said to him, "Do you see anything, Father Zhuang?" "Your servant sees nothing," was the reply. The Duke then returned home, talking incoherently and becoming ill. For several days he did not go out. Among the officers of Chur there was a Chuang Tzu, who said to the Duke, "Your Grace is injuring yourself. How could a ghost injure you?" When a paroxysm of irritation is dispersed and the breath does not return to the body, what remains in the body is not sufficient for its wants. When it ascends and does not descend, the patient becomes accessible to gusts of anger. When it descends and does not ascend, he loses his memory of things. When it neither ascends nor descends, but remains about the heart and the center of the body, it makes him ill. The Duke said, "Yes, but are there ghosts and sprites?" "There are. About mountain tarns there is the Li, about furnaces the Che, about dust heaps inside the door the Lei Ting, in low-lying places in the northeast the Pei A and Hua Long leap about, and in similar places in the northwest there dwells the Xiyang. About rivers there is the Wang Xiang, about mountains the Xin, about hills the Kui, about wilds the Fang Huang, about marshes Wei Tuo." "What is the Wei Tuo like?" asked the Duke. Chuang Tzu said, "It is the size of the hub of a chariot wheel and the length of the shaft. It wears a purple robe and a red cap. It dislikes the rumbling noise of chariot wheels. When it hears it, it puts both its hands to its head and stands up. He who sees it is likely to become the leader of all the other princes." Duke Huan burst out laughing and said, "This was what I saw." On this he put his robes and cap to rights and made Huang Tzu sit with him. Before the day was done, his illness was quite gone. He knew not how. Chuang Tzu was rearing a fighting cock for the king. Being asked after 10 days if the bird were ready, he said, "Not yet. He is still vain and quarrelsome and relies on his own vigor. Being asked the same after another 10 days, he said, "Not yet." He still responds to the crow and the appearance of another bird. After 10 more days, he replied, "Not yet." He still looks about angrily and is full of spirit. When the fourth 10 days had passed, he replied to the question, "Nearly so. Though another cock crows, it makes no change in him. To look at him, you would say he was a cock of wood. His quality is complete. No other cock will dare to meet him, but will run." Confucius was looking at the cataract near the gorge of Lu, which fell a height of 240 cubits, producing a turbulence in which no tortoise, crocodile, fish, or turtle could play. He saw, however, an old man swimming about in it, as if he had sustained some great calamity and wished to end his life. Confucius made his disciples hasten along the stream to rescue the man. By the time they had gone several hundred paces, the old man was walking along, singing, with his hair disheveled, and enjoying himself at the foot of the embankment. Confucius followed and asked him, saying, "I thought you were a sprite, but I see that you are a man. Let me ask if you have any particular way of treading the water." The man said, "No, I have no particular way. I began to learn the art at the very earliest time. As I grew up, it became my nature to practice it. My success is now as sure as fate. I enter and go down with the water in the very center of its whirl, and come up again with it when it whirls the other way. I follow the way of the water and do nothing contrary to it. This is how I tread it." Confucius said, "What do you mean by saying that you began to learn the art at the very earliest time? That as you grew up it became your nature to practice it, and that your success in it now is as sure as fate?" The man replied, "I was born among these hills, and lived contented among them. That was why I say I have trod this water from my earliest time. I grew up by it, and have been happy treading it. This is why I said to tread it had become natural to me. I know not how I do it, and yet I do it. That is why I say my success is as sure as fate." Ching, the worker in wood, carved a bell stand. When it was completed, all who saw it were astonished, as if it were the work of spirits. The Marquis of Lu went to see it, and asked by what art Ching had succeeded in producing it. "Your subject is but a mechanic," was the reply. "What art should I be possessed of? Nevertheless, there is one thing that I will mention. I did not venture to waste any of my power, and I felt it necessary to fast in order to compose my mind. After fasting for 3 days, I did not presume to think of any congratulation, reward, rank, or emolument that I might obtain by my task. After fasting 5 days, I did not presume to think of the condemnation or commendation that it would produce, or of the skill or want of skill that it might display. At the end of the 7 days, I have forgotten all about myself, my 4 limbs, and my whole person. By this time, the thought of your Grace's court, for which I was to make the thing, had passed away. Everything that could divert my mind from exclusive devotion to the exercise of my skill had disappeared. Then I went into the forest and looked at the natural forms of the trees. When I saw one of a perfect form, the figure of the bell stand rose up to my view, and I applied my hand to the work. Had I not met with such a tree, I must have abandoned that object. But my heaven-given faculty and the heaven-given qualities of the wood were concentrated on it. So it was that my spirit was thus engaged in the production of the bell stand. Tuang Yaksher was introduced to Duke Chuang to exhibit his driving. His horses went forward and backward with the straightness of a line, and wheeled to the right and left with the exactness of a circle. The Duke thought that the lines and circles could not be surpassed if they were woven with silken strings, and told Tuang Yaksher to make 100 circuits on the same lines. On the road, Yan Hua met the epic peg. On entering the palace and seeing the Duke, he said, "Choose horses will break down." The Duke was silent and gave no reply. After a little, the horses did not come back, having broken down. The Duke then said, "How did you know that it would be so?" Yanhua said, "The horses were exhausted, and Chur was still urging them on. It was this which made me say that they would break down." The artisan Shui made things round and square more exactly than if he had used a circle and square. The operation of his fingers required no application of his mind. His intelligence was entire and encountered no resistance. To be unthought of by the foot that wears it is the fitness of a shoe. To be unthought of by the waist is the fitness of a girdle. When one's wisdom does not think of the right or the wrong of a question under discussion, that shows the suitability of the mind for the question. When one is conscious of no inward change or outward attraction, that shows the mastery of affairs. He who perceives at once the fitness and never loses the sense of it has the fitness that forgets all about what is fitting. There was a Zhuang who went to the door of the pianza and said to him in a strange, perturbed way, "When I lived in my village, no one took notice of me, but all said that I did not cultivate my fields. In a time of trouble and attack, no one took notice of me, but all said that I had no courage. But that I did not cultivate my fields was really because I never met with a good year, and that I did not do service for our ruler was because I did not meet with a suitable opportunity. I have been sent about my business by the villagers, and I am driven away by the registrars of the district. What is my crime? O heaven, how is it that I have met with such a fate?" Pienza said to him, "Have you not heard how the perfect man deals with himself? He forgets that he has a liver and gall. He takes no thought of his ears and eyes. He seems lost and aimless beyond the dust and dirt of the world. And he enjoys himself at ease in occupations untroubled by the affairs of business. He may be described as acting, and yet not relying on what he does, as being superior, and yet not using his superiority to exercise any control. But now you would make a display of your wisdom to astonish the ignorant. You would cultivate your person to make the inferiority of others more apparent. You seek to shine as if you were carrying the sun and moon in your hands, that you are complete in your bodily frame and possess all its 9 openings, that you have not met with any calamity such as deafness, blindness, or lameness, and can still take your place as a man among other men. In all this you are fortunate. What leisure have you to murmur against heaven? Go away, sir." Sun Xiu on this went out, and Pienza went inside. Having sat down after a little time, he looked up to heaven and sighed. His disciples asked him why he sighed, and he said to them, "Xiu came to me a little while ago, and I told him the characteristics of the perfect man. I'm afraid he will be frightened and get into a state of perplexity." His disciples said, "Not so. If what he said was right and what you said was wrong, the wrong will certainly not be able to perplex the right. If what he said was wrong and what you said was right, it was just because he was perplexed that he came to you. What was your fault in dealing with him as you did?" Pienza said, "Not so. Formerly a bird came and took up its seat in the suburbs of Lu. The ruler of Lu was pleased with it and provided an ox, a sheep, and a pig to feast it, causing also the Chui Shao to be performed to delight it. But the bird began to be sad, looked dazed, and did not venture to eat or drink. This is what is called nourishing a bird as you would nourish yourself. He who would nourish a bird as a bird should be nourished, should let it perch in a deep forest, or let it float on a river or lake, or let it find its food naturally and undisturbed on the level dry ground. Now Shio came to me, a man of slender intelligence and slight information. I told him of the characteristics of the perfect man. It was like using a carriage and horses to convey a mouse, or trying to delight a quail with the music of bells and drums. Could the creatures help being frightened?